She's in violation of community moral policy, Marlene Jeswick said, slamming the folded notice against my chest before I could even open the door. Birth control deliveries are prohibited under Section 12 of the Family Wellness Code. Her voice carried across the driveway, sharp and certain, the kind of sound that makes neighbors peek through blinds. I could see the bold letters at the top of the paper. Notice of non-compliance. Immediate action required. Marlene, president of the Silver Pines Estates HOA, wore that self-satisfied expression I'd seen her use when citing someone for a mailbox color. Only this time, she was talking about my wife's medication. You'll cease all pharmaceutical deliveries of that nature, she added, lowering her sunglasses. This is a family-oriented community. I let the paper hang in the air between us for a second too long. Then I said calmly, "You do realize I'm the pharmacist who fills half this community's prescriptions, right?" That stopped her hand mid-gesture. Her smile wavered, just enough for me to see the confusion flicker behind her authority. "Then you should know better," she said, recovering too fast. I almost laughed. "That's the part you're going to regret. Because this wasn't about a shipment. This was about medical privacy. And in my world, tampering with prescriptions doesn't end with a warning. It ends with a felony. If you've ever watched someone try to play God with a rulebook, stay with me. Because by the end of this, police cars would be parked right where she stood. And you'll want to see how it got that far. My name's Evan Doran. I'm a licensed clinical pharmacist specializing in regulatory compliance. I've spent 15 years making sure people don't break laws like the one Marlene just tried to invent. I'm not a lawyer. I don't raise my voice. But I know exactly which agencies pick up the phone when patient confidentiality is violated, and how fast they move when a complaint includes tampering. Tessa, my wife, stepped out from behind the screen door. Her face was pale, the way it gets when her heart rate spikes. She's been through enough. Hormonal medication isn't a lifestyle choice. It's a medical prescription. I stood in that Florida heat, clutching the paper, thinking of the years it took to stabilize her health, the doctor visits, the routine we built around keeping things normal. That small orange bottle in our bathroom cabinet isn't politics. It's survival. "This isn't your concern," Marlene snapped. "It is," I said, "because what's in that cabinet keeps my wife's body safe, and what you're holding is an attempt to criminalize her existence." She flinched at that, her authority faltering for a fraction of a breath. Then she tried to recover with bureaucratic venom. "Failure to comply results in daily fines," she said, already turning toward the sidewalk. "We're within our rights." The sun reflected off the HOA badge pinned to her clipboard, 3 letters she thought gave her divine jurisdiction. I watched her march away, the paper trembling slightly in my hand, my pulse sinking with the rustle of palm leaves above. Silver Pines was supposed to be safe, quiet, predictable. The kind of neighborhood where nothing personal ever became public. But Marlene had just made it personal. That cabinet in our bathroom, white wood, locked, humming with the quiet sound of Tessa's electric toothbrush, had suddenly become a vault of rebellion. Inside were the bottles that kept her life on track, and now they were evidence of moral misconduct. When I stepped back inside, Tessa was standing by the counter, arms folded, eyes wet. "She can't do this," she said. "She just did," I replied. "But I'll undo it." I took the paper, folded it once, and placed it next to her medication bottle. That's when I knew exactly what this would become. Not another petty HOA dispute about grass height or fences. This was an invasion of privacy, a public shaming disguised as neighborhood order. And the worst part? It was going to get worse before it got better. I turned toward the window, saw Marlene still talking to another neighbor down the street, waving her clipboard like a badge of faith. The smell of cut grass drifted in through the open door. Somewhere behind me, the pill timer beeped, right on schedule. And for the first time in my life, I felt my professional calm twist into something sharper. Because when you threaten my wife's health under the pretense of community wellness, you're not enforcing policy, you're committing malpractice, and I know exactly how to treat that condition. The next morning, the smell of fertilizer mixed with Florida humidity as I walked to the community mail kiosk. I wasn't expecting anything except junk flyers, but the corkboard beside the boxes stopped me cold. A new HOA bulletin was pinned in the center, stamped in Marlene Jeswick's neat cursive, Silver Pines Family Wellness Initiative, promoting responsible household health practices. Below it, bullet points listed things no sane neighborhood would regulate: restrictions on inappropriate pharmaceuticals, non-family medical deliveries, and chemical-based contraception. I read it twice, each line heavier than the one before. This wasn't about my wife anymore. She'd written this for everyone. A woman from 2 doors down, Ruth Navarro, shuffled beside me, clutching her electric bill. "You got one of those letters too?" she asked. I nodded, her voice lowered. "She sent mine because I take hormone replacements, said it's against the values clause." She looked around before adding, "Half the women on this street are terrified she'll start reading our mail." I felt something hard settle in my chest. "She can't do that," I said. "It's a federal offense." Ruth shrugged like that word, federal, didn't mean anything here. "She thinks the HOA is the law." The corkboard fluttered as a breeze passed. Every notice, every signature, every threat hung like public shame disguised as policy. I could already picture Marlene writing them out in her tidy handwriting, savoring each word. As I opened our mailbox, the sharp smell of paper ink hit me. Inside was another envelope with the HOA crest. I tore it open and read, "Reminder, your household remains under review. Continued noncompliance may result in suspension of amenities." My jaw locked. Amenities, meaning the pool, the gym, the park where Tessa walked every morning. They were trying to isolate her under the cover of community standards. A car door slammed behind me. Marlene stepped out of her silver SUV, clipboard already tucked under her arm. "Morning, Mr. Doran," she called, voice syrupy sweet. "Hope you're reconsidering your position." "My wife's medication isn't up for debate," I said. "Oh, it's not debate, it's policy. You'll understand when the board finalizes the next round of notices." "You're overstepping your authority." "Authority?" She smiled. "The board gave me full discretion under moral health review." That phrase, it sounded rehearsed, legally hollow, but dangerous in the hands of someone who believed it. I could feel my pulse beating behind my eyes. "Then I'll use my discretion too," I said, "starting today." Her smirk flickered, just slightly as I walked away. I didn't look back, but I could feel her watching. Every step home felt like moving through a stage built for surveillance. Perfect lawns, cameras tucked under porch eaves, identical mailboxes labeled with compliance stickers. Silver Pines wasn't a neighborhood anymore. It was a controlled experiment in submission. Back inside, Tessa was sitting by the window with her laptop. "She posted it online," she said without turning. On the community forum, the same notice I'd seen at the kiosk was now pinned at the top, with comments from residents cheering moral integrity and protecting children. I scrolled through, jaw tight, until one username caught my eye. G. Hale, paramedic. Gregory Hale, HOA secretary. His comment was short, but telling. "Remind everyone to handle this carefully. We may be crossing into sensitive territory." It was the first sign of hesitation I'd seen from anyone on the board. I made a mental note. If anyone would break ranks later, it would be him. I opened a new browser tab and started reviewing HOA bylaws. Nothing in their charter allowed regulation of medical care. I cross-referenced the family wellness code she cited. It didn't exist in state filings. She'd fabricated it, probably convinced that no one would notice. That would be her undoing. I printed copies of every public posting, every bulletin board image, every comment thread. My desk became a collage of control. Behind me, the sound of the pill timer went off again. That same small beep marking Tessa's daily dose. It echoed like a countdown. I looked over at the medicine cabinet, that locked sanctuary we never thought twice about before. It had become a symbol now, one I refused to let her weaponize. Outside, Marlene's SUV rolled by slowly, window down, clipboard in her lap like a badge of faith. She waved as if this were just another friendly inspection. I didn't wave back. I just stared until she turned the corner because something had changed overnight. She thought this was still about moral policy. She hadn't realized it had already turned into a compliance investigation. And I was the wrong man to pick a fight with on legal grounds. I saw Gregory Hale for the first time that afternoon at the community clubhouse. Marlene had called an urgent administrative session, and the board gathered in their usual semicircle of folding chairs beneath the framed mission statement, "Silver Pines, a place for families. The air inside smelled like stale coffee and chlorine from the pool next door. I stood in the back, pretending to review the new bulletin, but really I was studying them. Gregory sat at the far end of the table, arms crossed so tightly his forearms trembled. He kept glancing down at the minutes sheet like he didn't want to be seen looking anywhere else. Marlene, in her beige blazer and pearls, was mid-monologue about moral cleanliness. Several residents have expressed concern about certain medical substances, she said. We're drafting language for a ban on deliveries that pose environmental or ethical risk. Gregory's pen rolled from his fingers and hit the table with a hollow clack. Ethical risk? He muttered, voice almost lost under the ceiling fan. Marlene ignored him. She held up a clipboard, the same one she'd waved in my face days ago. This will ensure community wellness, she said. We can't allow chemicals to disrupt household harmony. That word, chemicals, landed wrong. Gregory's shoulders flinched. He rubbed his palms together, fingers restless. He was a paramedic. He knew the difference between medication and poison. When the meeting adjourned, I waited until Marlene stepped outside to take a phone call. Gregory stayed behind, stuffing papers into a binder that wouldn't close. I walked closer. You look like you don't agree with her, I said. He froze, the binder halfway shut. I didn't say that. His tone was low, defensive, but his eyes said otherwise. I noticed the small tremor in his right hand. You don't have to, I said. You're the board secretary. You know the bylaws. None of this has legal standing. His throat tightened. It's not that simple. She thinks it does. And you? He finally looked up. The guilt was there, raw, unguarded. I just take the notes, he whispered. But he didn't move away. For a man, trying to stay uninvolved, he lingered too long. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. You realize she's targeting medical patients? She's posting confidential stuff online. That's not just immoral, it's illegal. His jaw flexed. I told her that, he said, almost under his breath. Last night. She said privacy's secondary to purity. He blinked hard, the kind of blink people do when they're fighting their own conscience. She won't stop. She's convinced she's protecting the neighborhood. His body betrayed him more than his words, tapping fingers, hunched shoulders, the way his left foot kept shifting toward the door, like he wanted to leave but couldn't. Then you know this ends badly, I said. For her, and anyone who signs off on it. He swallowed hard. You're not wrong, he said quietly. But if I speak up, she'll have me thrown off the board. My wife's the one who wanted us to move here. She loves this place. I could hear the conflict tearing through him, duty against decency. He gathered the last papers and zipped his bag, movements jerky. Gregory, I said, stopping him at the doorway. When this turns legal, and it will, you'll want to be on the right side of it. You've seen what she's doing. You know it's crossing the line. He hesitated there, framed by the glass doors where the Florida sunlight bled through. Sweat shone on his forehead. I didn't sign up for this, he murmured. None of us did, I replied. But you're the only one in that room who knows how dangerous her ideas really are. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, before walking out. Through the window, I watched him stop in the parking lot, hands on his knees, head bowed like a man fighting nausea. Marlene ended her call and waved at him, chipper as ever. He straightened too fast, forced a smile, and climbed into his car. The engine revved once, then idled, then finally drove off. That hesitation told me everything. He was cracking. The guilt was eating through his composure. And cracks like that, once they form, don't stay hidden for long. I slipped out of the clubhouse, the notice still burning a hole in my pocket, and glanced toward Marlene's SUV parked crooked by the curb. Her clipboard was on the passenger seat, pages fluttering against the dashboard. She was already on to the next neighbor, but I wasn't watching her anymore. I was watching Gregory's taillights disappear at the end of the street, knowing I'd just seen the first sign that the wall around her authority was starting to crumble. The next board meeting was standing room only. Word had spread through Silver Pines like pollen. Marlene Jeswick was unveiling a community health amendment. I arrived early, sitting near the back of the HOA boardroom, a low-ceilinged space that smelled of disinfectant and cheap coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, matching the tension humming. Through the crowd. She started the meeting with her signature smile, that practiced expression of moral superiority disguised as civic pride. This amendment, she said, tapping the projector remote, will protect the spiritual and physical well-being of Silver Pines families. Our duty is to ensure the substances entering this neighborhood are safe and aligned with community values. On the screen behind her appeared a slide titled Environmental Hormone Control Initiative. It listed absurd points: medication runoff, moral hygiene, social influence by example. I felt my hands curl into fists beneath the table. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She'd packaged persecution as policy. A man in front whispered to his wife, "What does that mean?" And she whispered back, "Birth control." Murmurs rippled across the room. Marlene raised her hand for silence. This amendment allows the board to monitor medical deliveries that could introduce contaminants into our environment. A few residents' pharmaceutical choices have raised legitimate concerns. That phrase, "a few residents," was the dagger. Everyone knew she meant us. I stood. "You're not qualified to assess medical risk, Mrs. Jeswick." Every head turned. Her smile stayed, but her eyes hardened. "Mr. Doran, you're welcome to speak during resident comment time." "No," I said. "This qualifies as a procedural violation. The HOA has no jurisdiction over private health care." She folded her arms. "We have the right to protect our neighborhood from harm." "And I have the right," I said evenly, "to remind you that tampering with prescription access is a federal offense. You're crafting policy on criminal ground." That broke the room's rhythm. Someone coughed. A few people shifted uneasily in their seats. Marlene's veneer cracked, but only slightly. "Let's stay civil," she said tightly. "This isn't about one family." "It's exactly about one family," I countered. "And you know whose." I could feel Gregory's gaze on me from the end of the board table. He looked paler than usual, eyes down, fingers tracing invisible circles on his notebook. His body language screamed conflict, caught between the truth he knew and the authority sitting beside him. "If you're concerned about environmental contamination," I continued, "I can personally provide a chemical breakdown. I'm a pharmacist. I handle controlled substances daily. Your claims don't hold scientific water." "That's your opinion," Marlene said. "It's state-verified fact," I replied. "And if you'd like, I can forward your statements to the Department of Health for review." That hit its mark. Her pen froze midair. "Is that a threat?" "It's a professional courtesy." The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Gregory finally looked up, his knee bouncing under the table. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then stopped. Marlene closed her binder with a sharp snap. "Meeting adjourned," she announced. She didn't even take questions. People began to whisper as chairs scraped against the floor. Outside, the late afternoon light cast long shadows over the parking lot. I walked toward my car when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Gregory caught up, breath uneven, his shirt clinging to sweat. "You shouldn't push her like that," he said quietly. "She's losing control. Then she should stop pretending she has any." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You were right in there, about the legal stuff, but she won't back down. She told the board she'd purify the neighborhood, even if it meant taking people to court." I studied him. His jaw was tight, but his voice trembled. "Gregory," I said, "you know this can't last. You're the secretary. You're recording all of this, right?" He hesitated. "Every word," he admitted. "But she makes me keep the originals locked in the HOA cabinet." "Keep your copies," I said. "They'll matter soon." He nodded faintly, then glanced toward Marlene's car pulling out of the lot. "She doesn't even see what she's doing anymore," he said. "It's like she thinks she's saving people." "That's the problem," I replied. "People like her never think they're the villains." He didn't answer, just shoved his hands into his pockets, staring at the ground like the asphalt might swallow him whole. As he walked away, I looked back at the clubhouse. Through the window, Marlene stood alone, staring at the space where I'd been sitting, her face blank, motionless, calculating. She wasn't done, not by a long shot, but neither was I. That night, the sound of tires crunching over gravel pulled me from sleep. I glanced through the blinds, nothing but the dim orange glow of the streetlight spilling across the front walk. Then came the faint metallic clink of our mailbox. My pulse jumped. I slipped on a shirt and stepped quietly onto the porch. The air was heavy with humidity, that sticky Florida stillness before rain. Down by the curb, a silhouette leaned over our delivery box, a small flashlight in hand. I didn't shout. I just grabbed my phone, zoomed in, and hit record. The figure's movements were quick, nervous. When the beam turned just right, I caught the flash of a reflective badge lanyard, Silver Pines HOA. And standing just beyond the curb, watching, was Marlene Jeswick herself. She wasn't touching anything. She never would. But her presence made it clear this wasn't random mischief. I stepped off the porch. "Evening, Mrs. Jeswick," I said. The figure flinched and bolted toward her car. Marlene didn't move. "You're violating federal mail law," I told her. "You're recording this, aren't you?" she said, her voice calm, too calm. "Always," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Then you should know the HOA reserves the right to inspect materials that could pose environmental harm." "The HOA doesn't override the United States Postal Service," I said, "and tampering with medical deliveries is a felony." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "You can't prove anything." "Not yet," I said. She left before I could take another step, her heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks to a threat she hadn't finished writing. When I opened the mailbox, the package inside was half torn, label creased. The refill date stamp was visible, but the seal was broken. My stomach dropped. I took photos of everything, bagged the envelope with gloves from my car emergency kit, and locked it in my office drawer. By morning, the adrenaline had cooled into calculation. I logged into the pharmacy's secure tracking system. Every refill request leaves a digital fingerprint, timestamp, IP address, user ID. It took only minutes to find the anomaly. A duplicate refill request placed 3 hours earlier from a different device. The sender ID didn't match any registered patient. Instead, it came from the Silver Pines HOA communications account. And whoever did it had used Marlene Jeswick's administrator login credentials. I sat back, heart pounding. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd leapt across it waving a flag. Tessa came into the office, robe tied loosely, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Another one?" she asked. I nodded. "They tried to duplicate your refill. Same prescription, same pharmacy ID. It's fraud." She rubbed her forehead. "Why would she—" "Control," I said. "She wants to scare us, to make you feel like you're being watched even inside our own house." I printed the system report, every log detail highlighted, every timestamp circled. I'd been patient until now, hoping she'd implode on her own. But this was proof of tampering. This was the kind of thing that made regulators show up in person. I called the compliance contact at the state pharmacy board, a woman named Reed who handled privacy violations. When I described the incident, her tone shifted from routine to sharp. "You're saying an HOA official accessed or attempted to access a prescription refill under false credentials?" "Exactly. Document everything," she said. "Keep physical evidence secure. We'll coordinate with law enforcement." When I hung up, the silence in the room was heavy. Tessa stood by the medicine cabinet, running her thumb along the edge of the door. "It's just pills," she said softly. "To them," I replied, "it's power." The next hour was a blur of camera checks, note-taking, and backups. I reviewed the footage from last night, the grainy clip showing Marlene's nephew opening our mailbox. His hoodie slipped halfway off, revealing a familiar face from one of her family barbecues. She'd sent him to do it. I uploaded the file to cloud storage and made 2 offline copies. Then I sent one to Reed's secure email. I wasn't waiting for the next letter. I was building a case. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the window like slow applause. It was strange, watching the water streak down the glass while knowing the real storm hadn't even started. I could feel it, the shift from defense to offense. Silver Pines had always been about appearances, about who followed the rules best. But rules don't matter when they're written by criminals hiding behind neighborhood signs. That night, before bed, I double-checked the lock on the cabinet, on the front door, on the gate. Not out of fear, out of preparation, because by morning, this wouldn't be her war anymore. It would be mine. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of ozone and wet asphalt. I parked in the small lot behind the pharmacy, the one with the faded lines and the rusted delivery chute. My hands still trembled from lack of sleep, but I wasn't tired. I was focused. Inside, the building hummed with low fluorescent light and the scent of antiseptic. My terminal booted slowly. the blue login screen flickering like an old heartbeat. I opened the digital activity report I'd sent to the state board the night before, my proof that Marlene Jeswick, president of the Silver Pines HOA, had used her administrative login to falsify a prescription refill. It still felt unreal. The timestamp, the IP address, the access trail, it all led straight back to her home router. I copied the report onto a secure drive and encrypted it. The next step wasn't confrontation, it was confirmation. I needed a second professional to verify the data before it went to law enforcement. I called a colleague at a nearby chain pharmacy, Derek Tran, an old classmate who worked as a compliance liaison. When I told him what I had, his tone flattened immediately. "That's criminal tampering, Evan. You're not talking about policy anymore. You're talking about an arrestable offense." "I need official validation," I said, "before the investigator files her report. Bring it here, quietly." I drove over during lunch, blending into the stream of commuters along the coastal highway. Derek met me at the service door, a cup of coffee in one hand, tablet in the other. Inside his office, I handed over the drive. He plugged it in and scanned the logs, eyes narrowing. "You weren't kidding," he muttered. "She used a registered organization email with an active medical license tag. You can see it here, spoofed under a pharmacy alias. This is serious, Evan. The system logs alone could trigger a federal audit." He turned the screen toward me. The digital signature was clear. mjeswick, silverpinesboard.org, followed by the trace ID that matched the fraudulent refill request. He sat back, exhaling. "You need to report this now. If she keeps doing it, it becomes a chain of offenses, not a single incident." "Already done," I said. "Board of Pharmacy investigators reviewing the evidence. I just need independent verification." Derek nodded, still scrolling. "You've got it. And Evan, don't go near her again without a witness. People like that double down before they break." His words stayed with me on the drive home. The sky was gray again, clouds hanging low over the manicured roofs of Silver Pines. Everything looked normal, lawns trimmed, sprinklers hissing, flags fluttering, but the calm felt counterfeit. Marlene's SUV sat outside her house, pristine as ever. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt calculation. She believed she could bend law into policy, and policy into control, but she hadn't counted on someone fluent in both. At home, I scanned the porch. No mail, no notes, just quiet. Inside, Tessa was working at the kitchen island, laptop open, face tense. "There's a post about us," she said without looking up. I leaned over her shoulder. The Silver Pines online forum glowed on screen. Marlene had written a new post under the title, "Community Health Warning." It was a smear, vague, venomous language about unauthorized substances and resident endangerment. The comments section was already filling with speculation. I read every line, my pulse steady. She'd gone public. Perfect. I clicked save as PDF. That was her mistake, making it visible. Public defamation linked to medical privacy. I drafted a brief summary to Investigator Reed and attached the file. The evidence stack was complete now. The tampered package, the forged request, and the public attempt to justify it. Outside authority was no longer optional. It was inevitable. I hit send and sat back. The clock on the stove read 6:14 p.m. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. "It's out of our hands now," I said quietly. Tessa exhaled, relief mixing with disbelief. "You think they'll actually come?" "They will," I said. "They don't ignore prescription crimes. She's about to learn that HOA rules don't outrank state law." As dusk settled, I checked the front camera feed one last time. Marlene's nephew walked past the house again, phone in hand, pretending to text. I saved the footage automatically. Patterns reveal themselves over time, and this one was almost complete. Upstairs, the medicine cabinet reflected a faint glow from the hallway light. Inside, Tessa's prescription bottles stood in perfect rows, each seal intact, each label crisp. For the first time in days, that sight felt like armor instead of target. When I finally turned off the light, I knew what tomorrow would bring. Silence first, then sirens. By morning, the air felt different, thick with that strange quiet that comes before something breaks. I was in the garage sorting through paperwork when headlights flashed across the driveway. A silver ambulance van rolled up slow, its side panel reading, "Hale Emergency Response." Gregory Hale stepped out. still in his paramedic uniform. His shirt was half untucked, his face drawn and sleepless. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, hands shoved deep into his pockets like a man debating if he should turn back. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "If Marlene sees your van, she's at the post office," he interrupted. "Board paperwork." His eyes darted toward the house, then back to me. "I can't do this anymore, Evan." The words came out raw, like he'd been holding them for days. I motioned him inside the garage, closing the door behind us. The faint smell of oil and rain filled the space. He started pacing. "You were right. About everything." He stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. "She told me last week she was going to take matters into her own hands. I thought it was just talk, but then she called me over to her place Tuesday night. Said she needed help checking something potentially dangerous." I didn't breathe. "What was it?" "A pill bottle," he said. "Yours, or your wife's." I recognized the label. She had it sitting on her counter in a plastic bag. Said she found it unsecured. His jaw clenched. "Evan, she didn't find it. She stole it." The air between us thickened. "You saw it?" "I saw everything," he said. "The label, the refill date, even the tamper seal. She said she was testing for chemical contamination. But she didn't test anything. She just took pictures. Said she'd prove moral negligence." His hands were shaking now. "That's a felony," I said quietly. "Do you have proof she said that?" He nodded, pulling a small digital recorder from his pocket. "I record every call-out, liability policy. I didn't realize it picked up that conversation until I listened last night." He handed it to me, his fingers trembling. "It's all there. Her voice, the date, the admission." I stared at the recorder, feeling the gravity of it settle like weight in my hands. "Why bring it to me?" He exhaled hard, staring at the floor. "Because if I give it to the board, she'll bury it. If I give it to the police without context, she'll say I doctored it. But you," he looked up, "you already have the chain of evidence. You know how to handle this legally. I just can't keep pretending I don't see what she's doing." He ran both hands through his hair, voice breaking. "She threatened to have me expelled from the HOA last night. Said I was undermining community integrity. My wife's terrified we'll lose the house." His shoulders hunched under the weight of it. I placed the recorder on the workbench beside my laptop. "Gregory," I said carefully, "you understand what this means? Once this goes to the investigator, it's official. She'll be charged." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I know, and I'm done protecting her." He turned toward the van, then stopped halfway. "There's something else?" She's been collecting private data from residents, medical notes, deliveries, pharmacy slips people threw out. She keeps them in a file cabinet at the HOA office labeled Community Health Index. She said it's for future reference, but I saw copies of people's prescriptions, not just yours. My stomach tightened. "She's been building a database, a shrine to her paranoia," he said bitterly. "She even asked me how long controlled substances stay in a person's system, like she was planning to use it." He rubbed his eyes. "You have to stop her." "I will," I said. "You already helped more than you know." He stood there a moment longer, the quiet hum of the garage fan filling the space. Then he gave a slow nod and walked back to his van. The door shut with a hollow clang, and he drove off without looking back. I sat at the workbench, staring at the recorder's blinking red light. Proof, clean, irrefutable, devastating. I uploaded the file to my encrypted drive, tagged it, and sent a copy to Investigator Reed with the subject line: "Additional evidence, witness statement, recorded 9:42 p.m. When the upload completed, I leaned back and exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. The victory wasn't loud, it was methodical. Marlene thought her influence made her untouchable, but now her own ally had handed me the weapon that would destroy her from within. The next morning, I drove to the public library, the one place in Silver Pines where Marlene Jeswick had no eyes, no informants, no clipboard. The parking lot was nearly empty, dew glistening on the hoods of parked cars. Inside, the air was cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of old paper and static from the computers. I took a seat at the back near the window, logged into one of the terminals, and pulled up my encrypted folder. The evidence chain was almost complete, the tampered prescription footage, the forged refill logs, and now Gregory Hale's recorded confession. Everything connected perfectly. This wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was a timeline, one that showed intent, execution, and cover-up. I opened a new document and began drafting my submission to Investigator Reed at the Florida Board of Pharmacy's Enforcement Division. Every word mattered. Legal phrasing, timestamps, data verifications. It had to be airtight. Marlene had operated under the illusion of moral authority. I would destroy that illusion with procedure. As I typed, I felt a steady calm replace the exhaustion. Each paragraph tightened the noose around her fraudulent narrative. When I finished, I attached the recorder file, labeling it Exhibit C. My cursor hovered over the send button. I pressed it. The email disappeared into the system, a quiet signal that would change everything. I exhaled, leaning back in the creaking chair, watching a pair of teenagers whisper at the opposite table. They had no idea a neighborhood war was being fought. From a library terminal. My phone buzzed. It was Reed. Her voice came through crisp and direct. Mr. Doran, I received your packet. I've reviewed the logs and the audio. And, I asked, gripping the phone tighter, we're proceeding with a formal investigation. Law enforcement will be notified today. You've done exactly what we needed. Chain of evidence, witness corroboration, digital proof. Don't confront her. We'll handle the next steps. Understood, I said, though part of me wanted to be there when Marlene's certainty finally cracked. You'll get a call from Detective Hollis later, she continued. He'll coordinate with us. Expect contact within 48 hours. Thank you, I said. I just want this to stop. It will, she replied. And for what it's worth, most cases like this never have witnesses. That recording will make prosecution inevitable. When the line went dead, I sat in silence. The hum of computers filled the room. Outside the window, the neighborhood seemed peaceful again, but it wasn't peace. It was the quiet before revelation. My hands were still for the first time in days. I'd spent weeks reacting, documenting, surviving her manipulations. Now I was dictating the outcome. Still, part of me couldn't shake the unease. People like Marlene didn't surrender. They imploded, and I needed to be ready when she did. I printed 2 hard copies of every document and sealed them in manila envelopes. One would go into my safe at home. The other, I slid into a return-addressed package for Reed's office, dropping it into the library's outgoing mail bin. Procedure, precision, control. That was my language, and it was the one Marlene could never speak. As I stepped outside, the morning sun burned through the cloud cover. My phone vibrated again, an anonymous message from a number I didn't recognize. You think rules protect you? I stared at it for a long moment, then saved the screenshot. Another line of evidence. The text came from a masked number, but the phrasing was unmistakable. Marlene had realized something was moving against her, and fear was seeping through her confidence. I climbed into my car, drove slowly back through Silver Pines, and past the HOA office. The blinds were drawn, but a light glowed faintly behind them. I pictured that Community Health Index file cabinet Gregory mentioned, overflowing with stolen information. Soon, the investigators would see it themselves. I parked in my driveway, opened the door, and let the humid air hit my face. Inside, Tessa was sitting on the couch with her laptop, eyes wide. They took down the forum, she said. The whole HOA page, gone. I smiled faintly. Good, it means she's scared. Do you think it's over? She asked. Not yet, I said, setting the library receipt on the counter. But for the first time, she's not the one making the rules. Upstairs, the medicine. Cabinet reflected the late morning light. The bottles inside were undisturbed, gleaming like small declarations of autonomy. I locked the door, not out of fear, but ceremony, closing the chapter that started with her arrogance. The next one would begin with sirens. By the second evening after sending the report, Silver Pines had gone unnervingly still. The HOA forums were silent, no newsletters, no bulletins, just digital quiet where Marlene Jeswick's authority used to live. I knew what that meant. She was scrambling. I waited, checking my phone every few minutes, half expecting Investigator Reed or Detective Hollis to call. Instead, it rang with an unfamiliar number late that afternoon. Mr. Doran? The voice was steady, clipped. Detective Hollis, Broward County PD. I've been briefed by the state investigator. We're coordinating with the Board of Pharmacy. I'll be visiting Silver Pines tomorrow morning to serve a warrant on the HOA office. We'd like you to stay nearby in case we need verification on the pharmacy data. Relief and adrenaline collided in my chest. I'll be ready, I said. You should know, he added. We've already flagged multiple IP traces from that HOA network. Yours isn't the only name tied to false prescription activity. There's more going on than you think. When the call ended, I just sat there, phone in hand, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. It wasn't just justice anymore. It was exposure. And exposure, for people like Marlene, was annihilation. I spent the next hour preparing. Every document, every timestamp, every log went into a folder labeled HOA Case 7A, Jeswick. I made a printed index, the kind investigators appreciated, organized, chronological, irrefutable. My office printer hummed steadily as dusk crept through the blinds. From the window, I could see her SUV parked across the street, headlights off. She was watching again. It should have frightened me, but instead it felt like confirmation. She knew she was cornered. I shut off the lights and left her nothing to see but her own reflection in the glass. By morning, I was in the neighborhood park, waiting. The place smelled of wet mulch and new grass, the sound of sprinklers cutting through the quiet. Parents usually brought their kids here, but not today. The benches were empty except for one old man reading a newspaper near the pond. My phone buzzed again. Gregory. They're here, he said, voice low. 3 unmarked cars, Reed's team, Hollis too. I could hear muffled commotion behind him, doors opening, voices raised. Marlene's losing it, he whispered. She's saying it's a misunderstanding. She's asking for me to vouch for her. Don't, I said firmly. You already did the right thing. Let them find what they need. A gust of wind rippled across the pond, sending the ducks scattering. I could almost picture the scene at the HOA office. Drawers yanked open, papers scattered, officers cataloging evidence while Marlene's composure shattered. For months she'd built a kingdom of control. Now, real authority had arrived, and it didn't speak her language. Gregory texted again 10 minutes later. They found it, the cabinet. My grip tightened around the phone. That single sentence meant everything. The Community Health Index database, the stolen records, the proof of systematic privacy violations. I started walking toward the clubhouse. The closer I got, the louder it became. Raised voices, the buzz of radios, the sharp click of camera shutters. Yellow tape stretched across the front steps. The words, police line, do not cross, Juan Despas. Stark against the sunlight. A uniformed officer stood guard near the entrance, clipboard in hand. When I identified myself, he nodded. They'll need you for verification, he said. Inside, the air was thick with paper dust and tension. Detective Hollis stood near the conference table, gesturing to the open cabinet drawers. Mr. Doran, he said, we've recovered documents containing residents' medical data, unauthorized prescription lists, and photographs of what appear to be your wife's medication. His tone stayed measured, but the implication was sharp. We'll be taking Ms. Jeswick in for questioning. Across the room, Marlene sat in a folding chair, hands clasped tightly on her lap. Her hair was disheveled, mascara smudged under her eyes. The clipboard that once symbolized power lay face down on the floor. You think you've won? She hissed when she saw me. I was protecting this community from decay. You were violating it, I said quietly, and now you'll answer for it. Hollis gestured to the officers. They lifted her to her feet, reciting her rights. For a brief second, she looked straight at me, not angry, not proud, just hollow. Then they let her out. Gregory stood in the doorway, pale but steady. They found records on over 30 residents, he said. Copies of prescriptions, delivery logs. It's worse than we thought. I nodded, scanning the chaotic room. Papers, binders, evidence bags. At least it ends here. No, he said. It ends when the neighborhood knows what she did. Outside, the sun was rising higher, casting long shadows over the perfectly trimmed lawns. I stepped beyond the tape, the noise fading behind me. The war was over, but the verdict would echo far beyond Silver Pines. And tomorrow, the silence she'd built her authority on would belong to someone else. The next morning, Silver Pines didn't look like a neighborhood anymore. It looked like a stage after the curtain had fallen. Empty, quiet and littered with fragments of what used to be control. The HOA office remained sealed under police tape, its windows dark, the reflection of squad cars fading as investigators wrapped up their search. I walked past it on my way to the clubhouse, where the board had called an emergency community meeting. It wasn't optional. Every resident had received the same notice. Attendance required, governance review. But everyone knew what it really was, a reckoning. Inside, the air conditioner hummed weakly against the crowded heat. Rows of metal chairs filled the hall, the same ones where Marlene Jeswick had once presided over her empire with a smile and a pen. Now the podium was empty, except for a microphone and a small stack of printed statements. Gregory Hale stood near the side wall, adjusting the speaker system with shaking hands. He looked exhausted, but lighter, like a man finally allowed to breathe. When he saw me, he gave a small nod. "They want you to speak," he said quietly. "Reed's report went public this morning. Everyone's seen the headlines." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the county newsfeed flashed across the screen. HOA president investigated for prescription, tampering, and privacy violations. Silver Pines residents demand reform. Below it was a photo of Marlene being escorted into a police cruiser. Her posture wasn't defiant anymore. It was brittle. I turned the phone face down on my knee. This wasn't about watching her fall. It was about ensuring no one like her could rise again. Gregory tapped the mic, clearing his throat. "Residents of Silver Pines," he began, voice quivering through the speakers. "We've gathered today to address the events of the past week. The actions taken by former President Marlene Jeswick were not only unethical, they were criminal. Evidence provided by residents has led to formal charges under state and federal law." He hesitated, looking toward me. "Mr. Doran has agreed to help us clarify what's next." I stood. The scrape of the chair echoed through the room. Dozens of eyes followed as I walked to the front. The podium was colder than I expected. I adjusted the mic, the same one she'd used to enforce her rules, and let the silence stretch just long enough for everyone to feel it. "Some of you were told this was about morality," I began, "about protecting families, protecting values. But it was never about that. It was about control, one person deciding who was pure enough to belong. My wife and I became the test case. What Marlene did wasn't leadership. It was surveillance disguised as virtue." A murmur rippled through the audience. I saw neighbors who'd once avoided eye contact with us now, nodding slowly. Shame and understanding sharing space on their faces. "What she did is a felony," I continued. "Tampering with medical privacy, forging prescription data, and using HOA authority to intimidate residents. That's not protection. That's abuse of power, and it ends here." Gregory handed me a printed sheet. "The state investigator's office," I said, reading from it, "has confirmed that Silver Pines will undergo full structural review. The board is suspended pending re-election under supervision of a legal compliance officer. Every resident's personal data will be deleted from HOA servers." Relief rippled across the crowd. Low gasps, whispers, then the sound of soft applause. From the back row, a woman raised her hand. "Is it true she kept records on all of us?" she asked. "Yes," I said plainly. "And the state has them now. Nothing will stay hidden." That answer seemed to release something in the room. Weeks of tension exhaled in unison. When I stepped away from the mic, Gregory met me halfway. His eyes were glassy, but clear. "They're forming an interim board," he said. "They want you to help write the new bylaws." I hesitated. "You sure the community's ready for that?" "After this?" He smiled faintly. "They'd elect your dog if it meant transparency." I looked back at the empty podium, the spot where she'd stood and dictated morality like scripture. Now it was just furniture. "All right," I said. "We start clean." As the crowd dispersed, sunlight streamed through the windows, landing on the floor where the old HOA seal had been taped for years. Someone had peeled it off earlier that morning, leaving only the faint outline of glue. I stepped over it on my way out. The air outside felt lighter, the neighborhood finally breathing again. The sirens were gone, but the echo of their meaning remained. Authority was no longer hers to wield. It was back where it belonged, with us. The re-election meeting was held in the community amphitheater, a circular space usually reserved for movie nights and potlucks. Tonight, it was overflowing. Nearly every homeowner in Silver Pines showed up. drawn by curiosity, outrage, or both. The air smelled of sunscreen, grass, and tension. A makeshift stage had been set up under the string lights, with a single microphone in the center. On either side, folding tables displayed the proposed reforms, new bylaws, financial transparency policies, and one document bearing my name, Resident Privacy and Medical Rights Charter. I hadn't planned to speak again, but as murmurs rippled through the crowd, I realized silence would be a mistake. The people who once looked away when Marlene abused her authority were now waiting for someone to tell them what came next. I stepped up to the microphone. The chatter dimmed instantly. The spotlight caught in the corner of my eye as I looked out over the rows of faces, some ashamed, some relieved, all exhausted. 2 weeks ago, I began, this neighborhood was ruled by fear. Fear of fines, fear of exposure, fear of being shamed into compliance. That fear was manufactured. It was policy used as punishment. My voice echoed faintly off the stucco walls. Marlene Jeswick believed that authority meant ownership, that she could dictate what a family's privacy was worth. She was wrong, and tonight we decide whether Silver Pines continues her legacy or buries it. A murmur swept through the audience. Someone near the front clapped once, then stopped, uncertain if it was the right moment. I turned toward the table of board members seated behind me. Only 3 remained, Gregory Hale among them. His shoulders were squared, eyes fixed forward, finally steady. Gregory stood. "Before this meeting proceeds," he said, voice trembling but clear, "there's something everyone should hear." He held up a small speaker, the same one connected to the digital recorder he'd given me. A hush fell. "This recording is from the night before the police warrant was served. Marlene invited me to her house. She didn't know I always record my calls." He pressed play. The crowd leaned forward. Marlene's voice filled the air, shrill and certain. "I'll prove that woman's medication endangers others. If I have to take it myself to show it's harmful, I will. Then, they'll thank me once she's exposed. The HOA must protect purity above law." The sound cut off. The silence that followed was suffocating. Somewhere in the back, someone muttered, "She really said that?" Another voice replied, "It's her, no question." Gregory swallowed, setting the device down. "That's who led us. That's what she called morality." His words trembled, but his spine didn't bend this time. I stepped forward again. "She used faith as a weapon and fear as her currency. And she almost got away with it because we mistook paperwork for power. But this—" I lifted the charter document from the table. "This ends that era." I turned to face the crowd directly. "Every resident has the right to medical privacy. No board, no bylaw, no self-appointed guardian of morality will ever access what happens inside your home or your health again. This isn't just about my family. It's about every person she violated with her obsession." The crowd's stillness broke. Applause erupted. Not the hesitant kind from earlier meetings, but something fuller, heavier, like exhaling after a long-held breath. People stood, some cheered. Even the ones who'd once defended Marlene clapped, faces flushed with remorse. A woman in the second row called out, "You're the reason we still have this neighborhood." I shook my head. "No, I'm just the one who said enough. The reason this place survives is because people like Gregory decided truth mattered more than comfort." He blinked, looking down as the applause grew louder. The sound carried across the amphitheater, bouncing against the palm trees and stucco walls. For the first time, Silver Pines didn't sound like a gated cage. It sounded alive. When the noise finally quieted, Gregory stepped forward with the re-election forms. "We'll take nominations for interim leadership," he said. A man from the back shouted, "Nominate Doran!" Laughter and cheers followed, spreading like wildfire. I raised a hand. "I'm not running," I said, "but I'll help build the system that protects whoever does." That earned another round of applause, louder, freer. Someone started chanting, "Transparency now," and soon the entire amphitheater joined in, voices rising in rhythm. The phrase rolled like thunder across the open air. When it faded, Gregory raised his hand. "Then it's unanimous," he said, smiling. "The charter stands. The reforms pass." As people began to disperse, the lights overhead flickered against the night sky. I looked up at them, feeling the heat of the crowd's energy linger in my chest. For months, fear had been the neighborhood's heartbeat. Tonight, it finally changed tempo. The sound of justice wasn't quiet. It was a chorus. When the amphitheater finally emptied, the night fell quiet over Silver Pines. The string lights flickered off one by one until only the pale glow of the street lamps remained. I walked home alone, past manicured lawns and mailboxes that had once felt like prison bars. The air was heavy with humidity and something else. Peace. The kind that only arrives after chaos has burned itself out. As I turned the corner, I saw Gregory standing by the entrance sign, clipboard tucked under his arm. The old HOA emblem had been scraped away, leaving a blank white panel. He nodded when he saw me. "It's over," he said softly. "For now," I replied. "You did good work in there." "You too," he said. "The neighborhood owes you more than they'll admit." "They don't owe me," I said. "They owe themselves honesty." He smiled faintly, exhaustion visible in his eyes. "The investigators finished collecting everything from the office. The cabinet's gone. They're hauling it out tonight." He paused, looking toward the quiet cul-de-sac. "Feels strange, doesn't it? Like the whole place just exhaled." It did. For the first time, Silver Pines didn't hum with anxiety or rumor, just crickets and the distant hiss of sprinklers. I headed home, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Our porch light glowed softly against the siding. Through the window, I could see Tessa setting down her tea on the counter, her face calm, in a way I hadn't seen in months. When I opened the door, she turned, smiling quietly. "You stayed late. Meetings always run long when people start caring," I said. She laughed softly, brushing her hair from her face. "So, it's really done?" "As done as it gets," I said. "Marlene's facing multiple charges. The charter's passed. The neighborhood's rebuilding." She exhaled, leaning into me. "Then, we can finally live here again." I glanced toward the hallway, the small sliver of light spilling from the half-open bathroom door. The medicine cabinet glimmered faintly inside, its mirror catching the reflection of our joined silhouettes. I walked over, opened it slowly, and stared at the rows of bottles lined neatly on the glass shelves. They were ordinary objects again, stripped of the fear and shame Marlene had tried to attach to them. Just medicine. Just life. "It's strange," Tessa said behind me, "how something so small could cause all that." "That's what power always does," I said. "Starts small, grows in silence." I locked the cabinet again, hearing the soft click echo in the quiet. It didn't sound like defense anymore. It sounded like closure. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a glass of water, watching the last few residents walk home. Someone was laughing across the street, a sound I hadn't heard here in months. A little girl rode her bike past, streamers fluttering from the handlebars, her father jogging beside her. The place finally looked like what it was supposed to be, a neighborhood, not a jurisdiction. My phone buzzed beside me, a message from Investigator Reed. "Charges filed, press release at 10 a.m., Jeswick in custody without bail. Congratulations, Mr. Doran. You helped more people than you know." I stared at the screen for a long time before setting it down. There wasn't satisfaction in it, just a strange, steady calm. Justice wasn't loud. It was procedural, quiet, thorough. And that was exactly how it should be. Gregory texted a minute later. "New board meets tomorrow. They want you to sit in as compliance advisor." I smiled. He'd found his voice at last. I typed back, "Only if there's coffee." His reply came instantly. "Strongest in the county." I leaned back against the chair, letting the warm night air settle around me. Across the street, an empty for sale sign leaned against Marlene's front yard. Her house sat dark, blinds drawn, the ghost of her authority already fading. A single sheet of tape clung to the door, notice of seizure, fluttering in the wind like the last gasp of her control. I didn't feel pity, just relief. Inside, Tessa called from the living room. "Come to bed," she said. "You've done enough tonight." She was right. I shut off the porch light and took one last look at the quiet street, the same street where it had all begun. Then I closed the door, not with anger, not with triumph, but with peace. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.